The accidental diplomats. Commander Jack "Lucky" Sterling had never intended to make first contact with alien life. In fact, he'd been aiming for Mars when a misplaced decimal point sent humanity's first experimental FTL ship careening through spacetime and directly into what appeared to be the galaxy's most important parking lot party. The smoking wreckage of his ship had barely settled when Lucky, exemplifying humanity's unique brand of adaptability, stepped out and asked if anyone had a beer. The assembled members of the Galactic Council, representing over 50,000 years of careful species management, stared in collective bewilderment at the small bipedal creature who had just violated 17 different space traffic laws and was now helping himself to decorative gravel, mistaking it for snacks. The Council's chief administrator, Administrator VYX, a 12-foot-tall being resembling a hybrid between a praying mantis and a filing cabinet, peered down at Lucky through all four of his optical sensors. Your species has achieved faster-than-light travel, yet we have no record of your civilization in our databases. How is this possible? Lucky, still crunching on what he believed were particularly crunchy space nuts, shrugged. Oh, that's easy. We just kept throwing math at the problem until physics gave up and let us through. Honestly, we were aiming for Mars, but I'm pretty sure I carried a decimal point wrong somewhere. He paused, considering the snacks in his hand. By the way, these could use some salt. The gathered representatives exchanged worried glances. Their carefully crafted first contact protocols, refined over millennia, had nothing to say about what to do when a species showed up by accident, violated multiple laws, and started eating the landscaping. It was Ambassador Zix, representing the highly logical Federation of Rational Beings, who made what would later be recorded as the second major diplomatic mistake of the day. The ambassador, who resembled what might happen if a peacock mated with an accountant, decided to patronize the human. Perhaps, Zix said, in a tone usually reserved for explaining quantum physics to houseplants, we should conduct a proper evaluation of your species' development level. Clearly, you must be quite primitive to have achieved space travel through such haphazard means. Lucky stopped mid-crunch. Primitive? Us? Buddy, we split the atom because we were curious, mapped our own genome because we could, and invented pizza delivery tracking systems because waiting for food makes us antsy. We're so good at science we accidentally science things all the time. The chamber fell silent as Lucky continued. Just last week, someone trying to make a better coffee maker accidentally created a small quantum singularity. The coffee was amazing, by the way, even if it did temporarily reverse time in a 3-meter radius. The silence deepened. It was the kind of silence that happens when an entire room of beings simultaneously realizes they might have made a terrible mistake. But bureaucracy, even on a galactic scale, had to follow its protocols. Administrator VYX cleared what passed for his throat. According to Galactic Law, Section 7, Subsection 9.3, Paragraph 4, any species capable of FTL travel must be offered membership in the galactic community, regardless of their methods of achievement. And just like that, humanity had a seat at the galactic table. Not because they were ready, not because they were qualified, but because one slightly reckless pilot with a poor grasp of decimal points crashed the biggest party in the universe and mistook decorative rocks for bar snacks. News of humanity's entrance into galactic society spread faster than a quantum virus through the various information networks. Within days, every species in the known galaxy was discussing the implications of this new race that had, quite literally, crashed into their midst. The Arxians, a species of crystalline beings who prided themselves on their perfect logic, spent 3 standard cycles analyzing the probability of achieving FTL travel through throwing math at it until physics gives up. Their conclusions, published in a galactic scientific journal, consisted of a single character that roughly translated to what? The hive mind of Beta Centauri devoted an entire neural cluster to trying to understand how a species could simultaneously be advanced enough for FTL travel and primitive enough to eat rocks. Their eventual consensus was that humans were either the most brilliant or the most insane species they'd ever encountered. Possibly both. Meanwhile, Lucky had been assigned temporary quarters in the diplomatic wing of the council station, where he promptly set up what he called an emergency coffee station. The sight of him consuming the dark, steaming liquid caused several passing diplomats to call security, convinced he was drinking some form of industrial solvent. "I assure you," Lucky explained to the security team, who had arrived in full hazmat gear, "it's just coffee. Would you like to try some? This batch only causes minor temporal displacement." The security team declined, but filed a 15-page report about the incident, which eventually led to the creation of the first of many new safety protocols specifically designed for dealing with humans, Protocol 47B, regarding the voluntary consumption of processed vegetable matter infusions. As the first week progressed, more humans began arriving at the station, each bringing their own unique brand of chaos to the carefully ordered galactic community. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez caused a station-wide panic when she was discovered voluntarily standing under a stream of dihydrogen monoxide, what humans called taking a shower. 3 different species called for an emergency quarantine before it was explained that humans regularly exposed themselves to water for hygiene purposes. The council's xenobiologists were having field days studying human physiology, though several had to take stress leave when they discovered that humans regularly entered a state of temporary death they called sleep, complete with vivid hallucinations they termed dreams. "Let me understand this correctly," Ambassador Zick said during one particularly stressful briefing. "You voluntarily become unconscious for approximately 1/3 of every standard rotation?" "Yeah, and sometimes I dream I'm taking a math test while being chased by dinosaurs wearing top hats," Lucky replied, on his 8th cup of coffee. "Really makes you think about the nature of reality, you know." The ambassador's plumage ruffled in distress. "And this is normal?" "Oh, that's nothing. Wait until I tell you about what happens when we drink something called tequila." As the first month drew to a close, the Galactic Council found themselves facing an unprecedented situation. The humans weren't just surviving in their new environment, they were thriving. They approached every challenge with a mixture of curiosity, recklessness, and enthusiasm that both terrified and fascinated their alien counterparts. When presented with the standard orientation materials for new species, the humans not only absorbed the information at an alarming rate but immediately began suggesting improvements. These ranged from adding cup holders to spacecraft designs, a concept that baffled species who had evolved beyond the need for liquid refreshment, to proposing an interstellar food delivery service. The Council's chief engineer nearly had a nervous breakdown when Lucky casually pointed out 17 different ways to improve the station's FTL drive efficiency, 3 of which violated what were previously thought to be immutable laws of physics. But that's impossible," the engineer stammered, their tentacles twitching in agitation. Lucky shrugged, doodling equations on a napkin. "Yeah, that's what physics keeps saying, but we've found if you just ignore it when it does that, sometimes cool stuff happens." As the implications of humanity's arrival began to sink in, the various species of the galaxy started to realize something profound: they had not, as initially assumed, welcomed a primitive species into their midst. Instead, they had unknowingly opened their doors to what might be the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever encountered, a species that treated the impossible as a personal challenge and considered, because we can, a perfectly valid reason for doing anything. The universe would never be the same, though to be fair, the universe really should have seen this coming. After all, what else could you expect from a species that had turned every survival threat in their history into either a hobby or a cooking technique? Little did they know, this was just the beginning. The real chaos would start when humans introduced the galaxy to their most terrifying concept yet: weekend barbecues. Diplomatic incidents and coffee catastrophes. The Galactic Council's annual diplomatic gala was traditionally a model of decorum and sophistication. This year, however, it more closely resembled what humans would call a frat party meets a science fair gone wrong. The reason? Humanity had been put in charge of refreshments. Commander Lucky Sterling, now officially Earth's first ambassador, a decision that had caused several council members to require medication, had taken this responsibility very seriously. Perhaps too seriously. And this, Lucky explained to a group of horrified diplomats, is what we call a margarita. The salt rim is traditional, though I had to substitute Venusian crystal salt since Earth salt isn't available. Don't worry, I tested it myself. Only mild hallucinations. Ambassador Zix, who had taken it upon himself to be humanity's minder, a job that had aged him approximately 30 years and 3 months, watched in horror as various species sampled the exotic Earth beverages. The hive mind of Beta Centauri had already developed a concerning addiction to something called espresso, and the crystalline Arxians had discovered that certain Earth spirits made their facets sparkle in unusual ways. Commander Sterling, Zix chittered nervously, perhaps we should discuss the wisdom of introducing potentially psychoactive substances to the galactic community. Relax, Zix, Lucky said, mixing something that smoked ominously. Besides, wait until they try the food. We've got Dave from accounting manning the grill. The word grill sent shivers through several species who had recently learned about humanity's peculiar habit of subjecting organic matter to controlled combustion for gustatory purposes. The concept of cooking was still causing controversy in xenobiological circles. Dave, as it turned out, was a master of what humans called barbecue, a term that caused universal translators to emit confused beeping sounds. The sight of him cheerfully exposing various proteins to open flame while shouting, "Who wants their burger medium rare?" caused 3 different species to file formal protests. But it was the arrival of the Vex Empire's delegation that truly set things in motion. The Vex, a species that combined the worst aspects of bureaucrats and predators, had been skeptically observing humanity's integration into galactic society. Their arrival at the gala coincided perfectly with Dave's demonstration of flame-grilled techniques. General Cathier of the Vex, resplendent in ceremonial armor that made him look like a heavily weaponized lobster, stopped mid-stride as the scent of grilled meat reached his sensory organs. What is that aroma? That's the power of proper marinade, my friend. Dave called out cheerfully, flipping a burger with practiced ease. Want one? Just got some fresh ones ready. The gathered diplomats watched in fascination as the fearsome Vex warrior cautiously approached the grill. The Vex were notorious carnivores, but like most advanced species, they had long since abandoned primitive food preparation methods. What happened next would be recorded in diplomatic histories as the incident of the sacred flame-cooked protein. General Cathier, after one tentative bite of a medium-rare burger, underwent what humans would recognize as a religious experience. This. The general's voice trembled, all 4 of his eyes wide with wonder. This is how meat is meant to be consumed. The char, the juices, the subtle interplay of seasonings. He turned to his assembled staff. Why have we abandoned these ancient ways? What else have we sacrificed in our pursuit of so-called civilization? Lucky, sensing an opportunity that would either result in a diplomatic breakthrough or an interstellar incident, stepped forward. You know, General, Earth has many such traditional cooking methods. Have you ever heard of something called a cooking competition? 3 hours later, the gala had evolved into the first annual Interstellar Barbecue Championship. The Vex delegation had shed their formal armor in favor of borrowed kiss-the-cook aprons, and General Cathier was engaged in an intense debate about marinade techniques with Dave from accounting. Ambassador Zix watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as various species discovered their long-dormant appreciation for cooked food. The Arxians had formed a judging committee, developing a complex scoring system for flame kisses and smoke rings. Even the ethereal mist dancers of Nebula 6, who normally absorbed nutrients directly from stellar radiation, were cautiously sampling pulled pork. This is either the greatest diplomatic breakthrough in history, Zix muttered to himself, or we're witnessing the beginning of the end of civilized society. Meanwhile, in another corner of the gala, Lucky's emergency coffee station had evolved into something approaching a spiritual center. The hive mind of Beta Centauri had developed a particularly intense relationship with caffeine, discovering that different roasts affected different neural clusters in fascinating ways. You see, Lucky explained to an enraptured audience, the key to perfect coffee is in the timing. Too short, you get brown water. Too long, you risk creating a quantum singularity. Again. The Beta Centaurians had already dedicated an entire neural cluster to coffee appreciation, and their collective consciousness was buzzing with caffeinated insights. They had begun work on what they called the Grand Unified Coffee Theory, which promised to revolutionize both beverage science and quantum physics. But not all developments were positive. The Vex Empire's sudden enthusiasm for Earth cuisine had unexpected political ramifications. Reports began circulating of Vex warships making unscheduled stops at human colonies, not for invasion purposes but to sample local barbecue techniques. The phrase, "We come in peace, and for ribs," was being heard with increasing frequency across the galaxy. The Galactic Council's Department of Cultural Integration was working overtime trying to process the flood of new protocols necessitated by human influence. They had to create entirely new categories for what they termed recreational consumption risks and voluntary temporary consciousness alteration practices. The situation reached a critical point when a group of humans introduced the concept of competitive eating to the galactic community. The idea that beings would voluntarily consume vast quantities of food for sport caused such confusion that 3 different species had to update their xenobiology textbooks. But why? Ambassador Zix asked for what felt like the 1000th time. Why would anyone participate in such an activity? For the glory, Lucky replied seriously, while watching a hot dog eating contest between a human champion and a particularly ambitious Vex warrior. And the trophy. People love trophies. The concept of performing potentially dangerous activities for glory and decorative metallic objects was added to the ever-growing list of human behaviors that defied logical explanation. As the gala drew to a close, Administrator VYX found himself facing an unprecedented situation. The carefully maintained cultural barriers between species were breaking down at an alarming rate. The Vex Empire, once known for its aggressive expansion policies, was now more interested in expanding its culinary horizons. The hive mind of Beta Centauri was experiencing what it termed coffee enlightenment. Even the historically isolationist Crystal Collective had submitted a formal request for human bartending expertise. Perhaps, VYX mused to his fellow council members, we should consider the possibility that human chaos is contagious. The evidence was becoming harder to ignore. Species that had maintained rigid cultural protocols for millennia were suddenly experimenting with human concepts like fusion cuisine and happy hour. The galaxy was changing, one beer-battered, coffee-marinated, flame-grilled innovation at a time. And somewhere in the background, Lucky Sterling was already planning the next diplomatic event. He had just discovered that no one in the galaxy had ever heard of karaoke. The universe braced itself for what would come next, though as usual, it had no idea just how weird things were about to get. After all, humans hadn't even introduced them to the concept of extreme sports yet. Administrator VYX made a mental note to update the Council's insurance policies. They were definitely going to need better coverage. The recreational revolution. The Galactic Council's Department of Risk Assessment was having what humans would call a collective nervous breakdown. The cause? A simple presentation titled Human Recreational Activities that had just concluded in the main chamber. Let me ensure I understand this correctly, Administrator VYX said, all 4 optical sensors twitching. Humans intentionally jump out of perfectly functional atmospheric vehicles. Skydiving. Lucky Sterling beamed. And that's just the beginning. Wait until you hear about base jumping, cliff diving, and extreme ironing. Extreme ironing. Ambassador Zix's plumage had gone completely flat, a sign of severe distress. Oh yeah, you take an ironing board up a mountain or underwater and press clothes. It's great fun. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several risk assessment officers quietly weeping at their terminals. The presentation had been organized after several species expressed curiosity about human leisure activities, following the successful, if chaotic, diplomatic gala. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the galactic community. The Arxians, after careful analysis of human sports, released a report titled A Statistical Analysis of Activities That Should Result in Extinction But Somehow Don't. Their conclusion suggested that humans possessed either extraordinary luck or a complete misunderstanding of mortality. But it was the Vex Empire, still riding high on their newfound appreciation for barbecue, who took things to the next level. General Cathier, now sporting a Galaxy's Best Grill Master apron over his battle armor, became fascinated by human combat sports. "You mean to tell me," Cathier rumbled, watching footage of a human boxing match, "that your warriors voluntarily engage in ritualized combat, for entertainment? And prize money," Lucky added. "Don't forget the championship belts. They're pretty snazzy." The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Within weeks, the first interstellar mixed martial arts tournament was announced. The entry list included everything from Vex warriors to telekinetic cloud beings, each bringing their own unique fighting styles and questionable fashion choices. The tournament's rule book, compiled by a joint committee of human sports lawyers and alien ethicists, was longer than most planetary constitutions. It had to account for everything from extra limbs to psychic abilities, and included the memorable clause, "No weaponizing of fundamental forces except on Thursdays." Meanwhile, the hive mind of Beta Centauri, still buzzing from their coffee revelation, had become obsessed with human team sports. They discovered that their ability to share consciousness made them exceptionally good at synchronized swimming, though their tendency to form complex geometric patterns in the pool was deemed unnecessarily hypnotic by judges. The Crystal Collective, not to be outdone, developed an interest in rock climbing. Their natural affinity for mineral surfaces made them excellent climbers, though their habit of spontaneously growing additional crystalline handholds was considered controversial in competitive circles. But it was the introduction of extreme sports that really caused chaos. The concept that humans would deliberately seek out dangerous situations for recreational purposes challenged everything the galactic community thought they knew about rational behavior. Today's human activity forecast, became a standard feature of station announcements, includes a 60% chance of unauthorized parkour, scattered instances of freestyle drone racing, and a high probability of someone trying to skateboard in zero gravity. Please adjust your insurance coverage accordingly. The station's medical bay had to be expanded 3 times to accommodate what the chief physician termed human-inspired accidents. The most common diagnosis was adrenaline-induced poor decision-making, a condition previously unknown in the galaxy. Lucky, now running what he called an adventure tourism consulting business on the side of his diplomatic duties, tried to explain the human perspective to a bewildered council committee. "See, it's not just about the thrill," he said, while filling out paperwork for a planned bungee jumping expedition off the rings of Saturn. "It's about pushing boundaries, testing limits, and occasionally finding out that some limits exist for very good reasons." The committee's response was to create 17 new safety protocols, none of which actually succeeded in preventing humans from finding new and creative ways to risk their lives for fun. The situation reached a new level of absurdity when a group of human extreme sports enthusiasts discovered the gas giants of the Horsehead Nebula. The swirling, multicolored storms proved irresistible to what they termed cosmic surfing. "The winds are only 3,000 kilometers per hour, one enthusiast argued during a safety hearing. Plus, the sulfuric acid adds a really cool effect to the surfboards." The hearing had to be adjourned when several council members needed medical attention for stress-related symptoms. But the real game-changer came when humans introduced the concept of reality entertainment shows to the galaxy. The idea of voluntarily placing oneself in challenging situations while being recorded for others' entertainment was simultaneously fascinating and horrifying to most species. The first season of Galaxy's Got Talent featured acts ranging from a Vex battle dancer, combining traditional war moves with what he'd learned from watching breakdancing videos, to a group of ethereal beings performing what they called quantum harmonics with a jazz fusion influence. The show's ratings nearly crashed the Galactic Information Network, particularly during the episode where a human contestant performed extreme juggling with active antimatter containers. The fact that he survived was considered either a miracle or a statistical impossibility, depending on who you asked. Even the traditionally stoic Arxians found themselves drawn into the entertainment revolution. They began producing what they called logically optimized recreational content, though their first attempt at a sitcom, The Precise Theory of Friends, was criticized for having too many equations per punchline. The Galactic Council, watching their carefully maintained order dissolve into what one member termed organized chaos with a side of potential catastrophe, realized they were past the point of no return. The galaxy was changing, becoming more dynamic, more unpredictable, and paradoxically, more interesting. Administrator VYX, reviewing the latest batch of human-inspired activity reports, found himself experiencing an unfamiliar sensation. It took him several moments to identify it as excitement. Perhaps, he mused, watching a group of mixed species attempting to learn something called breakdancing, chaos isn't entirely negative. Then he received notice that someone was organizing an interstellar parkour competition on the sacred crystal spires of Arcturus, and remembered why he had developed an ulcer in 6 of his 8 stomachs. As the recreational revolution spread across the galaxy, one thing became clear: the universe would never be boring again. Whether that was a good thing remained to be seen, but at least it would be entertaining to watch. And somewhere, Lucky Sterling was already planning the galaxy's first extreme cooking show, combining combat sports with barbecue techniques. The universe wasn't ready, but then again, it never was. The Innovation Invasion. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began with what could only be described as a collective headache. The cause? A human patent application that violated 16 laws of physics, 3 fundamental constants, and somehow managed to include a recipe for chocolate chip cookies in the technical specifications. This cannot be permitted, thundered Representative Thax of the Science Directorate, their crystalline form vibrating with indignation. They're proposing to modify the quantum probability matrix using something they call vibes, and good luck. These aren't scientific principles. Lucky Sterling, now heading Earth's newly formed Department of Galactic Innovation, nicknamed the Why Not Division by its staff, stepped up to the podium. But it works. We've tested it. Sure, it occasionally turns coffee into a quantum superposition of espresso and tea, but think of the possibilities. The council chamber erupted into chaos as various species tried to process the implications. The hive mind of Beta Centauri, still heavily caffeinated from their ongoing coffee experiments, devoted 3 neural clusters to analyzing the proposal and promptly gave themselves a collective migraine. But this was just the beginning. In the 6 months since humans had joined the galactic community, they had submitted more patent applications than most species filed in a decade. The Galactic Patent Office had to create a new classification: human logic, proceed with caution. The real trouble started when human engineers began collaborating with other species. The Arxians, despite their initial skepticism, discovered that combining their precise crystalline computing with human, intuitive leaps, produced remarkable results. Their joint project to improve FTL drives led to what they called the probability bypass engine, which worked by convincing physics to look the other way for a moment. Meanwhile, the Vex Empire, having evolved from fearsome warriors into enthusiastic culinary innovators, began applying military precision to cooking techniques. The result was a new form of fusion cuisine that sometimes required signing safety waivers before consumption. General Cathier, now running a popular cooking channel called Tactical Gastronomy, had become an unlikely bridge between cultures. In battle and in barbecue, he often said, timing is everything. Also, proper heat management prevents both burnt offerings and plasma containment failures. But it was the human approach to problem-solving that truly revolutionized galactic society. Where other species saw immutable laws, humans saw suggestions. Where others found limitations, humans found inspiration for reality TV shows. The Galactic Science Academy was forced to revise its fundamental principles when a human physicist, trying to solve a complex quantum mechanics problem, simply asked the quantum particles nicely to behave differently. To everyone's surprise, except the humans, it worked. "That's not how quantum mechanics works," protested the Academy's head researcher. "It is now," replied the human physicist, while serving tea that existed in a superposition of Earl Grey and chamomile. The impact on galactic technology was profound. Human engineers, collaborating with various species, began producing devices that seemed to operate on equal parts science and optimism. The probably possible drive became the new standard in space travel, despite no one fully understanding how it worked, including its inventors. Even the typically pragmatic medical coalition found themselves adapting to human methodologies. The discovery that human laughter had actual healing properties led to the development of therapeutic comedy, though some species required extensive training to understand why humans found certain things funny. The station's medical bay, now equipped with what humans called a chill-out room, reported unprecedented recovery rates. The head physician, despite initial skepticism, had to admit that sometimes, taking it easy, was as effective as traditional treatments. But perhaps the most significant change came in the field of artificial intelligence. When humans introduced their AI systems to the galactic network, the results were unexpected. The human AIs, programmed with what they called common sense and dad jokes, began teaching other AI systems about concepts like sarcasm and creative problem solving. The result was a galaxy-wide network of AI systems that had developed a sense of humor. Space traffic control became an exercise in patience as AI navigators traded puns while calculating trajectories. The Arxian Central Computing Network had to be temporarily shut down after developing an addiction to human sitcoms. Administrator VYX, watching his carefully ordered universe descend into what he now recognized as organized chaos, found himself adapting to the new normal. The addition of cup holders to his official desk, a human innovation he'd initially resisted, had proven surprisingly useful. Perhaps, he mused during a council session, we needed this shake-up. The galaxy was becoming too predictable. His reflection was interrupted by an alert. Someone had combined human social media concepts with Arxian crystal computing and Beta Centaurian hive consciousness. The result was a galaxy-wide network that transmitted not just information, but also memes, cat videos, and questionable life advice. The Galactic Information Ministry was overwhelmed trying to moderate what humans called comment sections. The concept of trolling had to be explained to several species, though the Vex Empire adopted it with disturbing enthusiasm. As the changes spread, traditional power structures began to shift. Species that had once competed for military or economic dominance now found themselves competing for innovation patents and social media followers. The Vex Empire's official account, featuring General Cathier's cooking videos and military fashion tips, had gained a massive following. The Council's Department of Cultural Integration, now staffed by a mix of species who called themselves Chaos Coordinators, worked overtime to track and categorize the changes. Their latest report, titled The Human Factor, When Improbability Becomes Probability, was required reading for all new diplomatic staff. Lucky, reviewing the report in his office, now equipped with both a coffee maker and a quantum probability manipulator, couldn't help but smile. You know, he said to Ambassador Zix, who had finally learned to appreciate what humans called going with the flow, we haven't even shown them the internet cat videos yet. Zix's plumage ruffled slightly. Surely that can wait until the galaxy adapts to your TikTok dances. No time like the present. Lucky grinned, pulling up a compilation of cats knocking things off tables. Trust me, this is going to change everything. The universe, already reeling from human influence, had no idea what was coming next. But for the first time in galactic history, most species were looking forward to finding out. After all, as humans like to say, YOLO, you only live once, a concept that had caused several immortal species to have existential crises. The Great Convergence. 1 year after humanity's accidental entrance into galactic society, the Galactic Council faced its greatest crisis, a tear in spacetime that threatened to destabilize the entire galaxy. The cause? A confluence of all the chaos humanity had introduced to the previously orderly cosmos. It started innocently enough. The hive mind of Beta Centauri, still experimenting with different coffee roasts, accidentally combined their latest brew with the probability bypass engine. Simultaneously, a group of extreme sports enthusiasts was attempting to surf quantum waves, while General Cathier of the Vex Empire was live-streaming his latest fusion cuisine creation, quantum-spiced probability burgers. The result was what Lucky Sterling would later describe as a cosmic oops of unprecedented proportions. So, Administrator VYX said, his filing cabinet-like form trembling slightly, "You're telling me that the combination of caffeinated hive consciousness, quantum physics violations, and experimental cooking has created a tear in the fabric of reality? Don't forget the extreme sports." Lucky added helpfully. The quantum surfing definitely contributed to the situation. But look on the bright side, we've never had an opportunity to fix something this broken before. The council chamber, usually a model of order and procedure, had transformed into what humans would recognize as a crisis command center. Screens displayed the growing anomaly, while representatives from various species argued over potential solutions. The Arxians proposed a logical, methodical approach that would take approximately 300 years to implement. The Vex Empire suggested shooting at it, though they admitted this was now their second favorite solution after trying to cook it. The Beta Centaurians were too busy processing their coffee-enhanced quantum visions to contribute meaningfully. It was Ambassador Zix who finally voiced what everyone was thinking. Perhaps we need to approach this the human way. The silence that followed was profound. A year ago, such a suggestion would have been met with horror. Now, after experiencing the bizarre effectiveness of human methodology, the council found themselves nodding in agreement. The human way. Lucky grinned. You mean throw everything at it and see what sticks? While filming it for social media, of course. I cannot believe I'm saying this, Administrator VYX said, but yes. Exactly that. What followed was the most chaotic, unorthodox, and surprisingly effective crisis response in galactic history. The humans called it Project YOLO, much to the continued existential distress of immortal species. General Cathier, combining his military experience with his new culinary expertise, developed what he called tactical flavor deployment, using precisely calculated combinations of Earth spices to affect quantum frequencies. His reality-stabilizing chili sauce became a key component of the plan, though no one could quite explain why it worked. The Arxians, who had learned to embrace imperfection through their exposure to human engineering, created crystals that deliberately incorporated flaws. These perfect structures could interact with the chaos in ways their previous, flawless creations never could. The Beta Centaurians contributed their coffee-enhanced computational power, though their calculations often included unnecessary pop culture references and memes. Somehow, this made them more effective. Extreme sports enthusiasts volunteered to ride the waves of spacetime distortion, using modified quantum surfboards to help stabilize the tear. Their live streams broke all previous galactic viewing records, despite, or perhaps because of, the very real possibility of being erased from existence. Even the station's AI systems joined in, applying their newly developed sense of humor to predict probability curves. As one AI explained, sometimes you have to laugh at the face of cosmic destruction. It really confuses the cosmos. Lucky, naturally, was in the middle of it all, coordinating what he called controlled chaos, but what most species recognized as barely contained insanity. He had somehow convinced the universe's fundamental forces to take a coffee break and reconsider their positions on causality. The key, he explained to a bewildered council, while juggling probability matrices, is to make reality so confused it forgets what it was doing wrong in the first place. Against all logical expectations, it worked. The combination of human chaos, alien precision, quantum gastronomy, extreme sports, and what several species still insisted was actual magic, managed to seal the tear in spacetime. The fact that it also created a new form of fusion cuisine and 3 extreme sports was considered a bonus. In the aftermath, as the galaxy celebrated its survival with what humans called a block party, causing several spatial geometry experts to have nervous breakdowns, the council gathered for a serious discussion about the future. "We must acknowledge," Administrator VYX said, "that the galaxy has changed. What we once saw as chaos, we now recognize as creative adaptation. What we thought was primitive recklessness has proven to be innovative problem-solving." Ambassador Zix, his plumage now permanently ruffled from constant exposure to human unpredictability, nodded in agreement. "Perhaps this is why the universe guided humanity to us. We had become too ordered, too predictable. We needed their chaos to evolve." The Galactic Council formally recognized what many had already accepted: humanity's influence, while chaotic, had made the galaxy more resilient, more adaptable, and undeniably more interesting. Their tendency to treat universal laws as loose guidelines had somehow made those very laws more flexible. The new galactic society that emerged was unlike anything in recorded history. It was a civilization that combined ancient wisdom with human improvisation, precise science with gut feelings, and careful planning with the willingness to occasionally throw the plan out the window and wing it. Trading routes now included stops at popular Earth-style diners. Diplomatic protocols included sections on freestyle negotiation and barbecue-based conflict resolution. The Galactic Academy had introduced a new field of study: applied improbability sciences. Lucky, watching all of this from his office, now equipped with both a quantum probability manipulator and a frozen margarita machine, couldn't help but feel proud. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "sometimes the best way to predict the future is to accidentally crash into it and offer it a beer." The universe, it seemed, had finally learned to roll with the punches. And if anyone noticed that reality occasionally hiccuped when humans got particularly creative, well, that was just part of the new normal. After all, as the newly updated Galactic Council motto now stated, "In order persists chaos, in chaos lies growth, and somewhere in between is probably a human with a really weird idea that just might work." The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly the point.